Hi, we're here on Pride Pages podcast here in Boise, Idaho, and I'm here with Nikson Mathews, who is running for House of Representatives in District 16. Hi, welcome, Nikson.
Hey there, so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It means a lot.
Awesome. So, what was it like coming out in Idaho?
Growing up in Idaho was interesting. I grew up in southeastern Idaho, really small town of about 250 people during the 80s and 90s. And so coming out didn't happen for me for a very long time. I grew up in a time and place there wasn't a lot of information, there wasn't a language for me to kind of understand who I was. And so when I came out twice. I came out in my late 20s first as a lesbian, and then I came out later in my 30s as transgender. And so both experiences were very different for me. The first time that I came out, I was lucky to be in a community of people who were very supportive to me. It was terrifying because having to tell people that you are a queer person still is a scary experience. Even though I knew the majority of them would support me, it took me a long time to be able to share that information. And luckily, people were they really embraced me. But that was partly because I had built a community around myself of people who were like-minded. Um, when I came out as transgender, it was more so stressful because part of that was me having to figure out um, who I was. Because again, I just didn't understand and have the information and resources for so long of my life. It kind of felt like coming out was for myself a little bit too, like stepping off a cliff uh, where I just didn't know um, what kind of support that I would have. And so it was really disorienting for a period of time just because of, how I'd grown up. Again, I'm lucky to say that I had a lot of support from my community, but it was scarier in Idaho. This was a time when there was a lot more, I'd walk down the street, there'd be people uh, yelling slurs at me. I'd be in the grocery store and people would, say terrible things to me. I was afraid to go to the bathroom by myself. I was afraid to go anywhere by myself. And when you become so hyper aware of your surroundings at all times, that adds a lot of like stress and anxiety. And so for me, that second time of coming out, while like incredibly empowering, and I had amazing support from my family, my workplace, even my friends, there was this additional layer of you know fear that added a lot of stress and anxiety, specifically because of Idaho is a conservative place. Even Boise, that is still an issue here. And so it was a mixed bag, but overall, so happy and proud of myself to have come out. And I just want to name one thing is that coming out for people is such a unique and personal experience. So I think there are people who come out in a variety of different ways, and every way is valid. Some people may never be public about coming out. It might just be with close family and friends. So I just wanted to note that coming out is valid in any way and in any form that works for a person. But for me, this was how I wanted to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of you and your strength. It shows, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Uh, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. Go ahead and click on the buttons below. So, Nikson, why did you leave Idaho and what brought you back?
Yeah, I mean, I think why I left Idaho, a big part of it was what I just talked about. That need to feel hyper aware at all times really does take a toll on you, and it's stressful. I think layer on top of that, I wasn't sure if I would have access to really good healthcare here. When I first started receiving gender affirming care because of restrictions with insurance, because of accessibility here in Idaho, I was paying everything out of pocket. That was a big financial toll. It really adds up, doctor's appointments, therapy appointments. Um, buying the medication itself, all of that stuff really starts to add up. So that was as part of it. And then just at that time, wasn't sure if there were doctors here who really specialized in that care. So there was a variety of things that ultimately drove me uh, to move to Seattle. So I moved to Seattle in 2016, and that was shortly after I came out as trans. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life because one, I had space to kind of reflect on my identity. I had access to really good doctors. I had access to insurance that would cover this. And then I also met my incredible, well, we met earlier, but I started dating and my now married partner, my spouse. And so for that, I will forever be grateful for this move to Seattle. Um, Ultimately, what happened is COVID hit and we were working from home, working remotely. We really were strict on social distancing. So our pod was primarily the pod of two of us. And we started to really feel that. And we started to have conversations about wanting to be closer to family. And my family is here in Idaho. And so I also had a job opportunity that was really exciting that came up here in Idaho. Friends of mine I'd known forever reached out to me. And so kind of like all the stars aligned, it felt like a little bit. But Riley and I had to have a long conversation about, is this the right decision for us? Because Idaho was making headlines about the restrictive policies that were being introduced. And we knew that our life would change a lot in that way. And ultimately, we made the decision for family, for the job opportunity. But we also made a promise to each other that if we were going to make this move, we were going to get involved specifically with the LGBTQ community and try to make life better here as we could.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So, what inspired you to run for office, and how do you advocate for LGBTQIA and broader issues?
Yeah, so I did not expect when we moved here and we were like, we're gonna get involved and try to make a difference. Running for office wasn't necessarily on the radar for that.
You didn't look
Right?
at all the headlines and say, I want to move to Idaho.
I just if you would have asked me 3 years ago, or if you'd have told me this, I would have been like, really? I'm not sure if that, interesting insight. But it was last session was a particularly rough session. HB 71, which is the gender affirming care ban for youth, was introduced. And I very much remember sitting in community space and prior to going into this hearing for HB 71, watching these two young trans men talking about how they were accessing healthcare and how they were living authentically and they were meeting each other for the first time. And it was just really incredible moment to be able to witness, especially for myself who came out in my 30s, watching young people having access to resources, family who knows how to support them, healthcare, who knows how to provide care for them. It was really special. And then we went into this hearing and listened to the testimony, and we heard from the legislators, and they ended up passing the bill through HB 71 and ultimately passed it. Luckily, there's an injunction on it currently, but we all, after that hearing, went back to this community space together. And I witnessed these two young trans men speaking about that experience, and their entire presence had shifted. And they were devastated. They were worried about their future. They were just concerned about how this was going to impact something that made them still so happy. So that was a moment where I sat there and I was like, somebody needs to run for office. Why isn't somebody running for office? And then it kind of shifted into, well, why not me? I can do this. I can step up and do this work. So that's, what inspired me to run for office. I think a question I get from folks often is well, or a statement maybe, well, Nikson, you can't just support the LGBTQIA community. You can't just support trans people if you're going to run for office. And I really like to remind people when they say something like that, that while we absolutely have terrible legislation being directed at us, when we talk about education, when we talk about housing, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about obviously healthcare, these issues that impact Idahoans on a day-to-day, these are the same issues that impact us as well. And it's important to have our perspective when we're talking about those issues, because they impact us in a unique way in some instances. And so we need diverse perspectives to get to these well-rounded policies.
Well, thank you. I agree. When I moved back here, I was shocked to find we didn't have equal housing rights. So we do need that advocacy there. And so I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And so why is the LGBTQIA representation in the state house so important? You kind of stated that, but if you could elaborate a little more.
Yeah. So like a study done in 2020 noted that there are 48,000 LGBTQIA2S community members in Idaho. 48,000. 3% of LGBTQ folks, or LGBTQ folks, make up 3% of the workforce. And yet we have 0 people in our state legislature as representing the community. I think it's easy for people to think maybe this is a very small number of people in Idaho who are part of this community. And I want to note that's 2020. Likelihood is that has changed. There's probably more of us, honestly, especially as we see the younger generations grow up and more often identifying as part of the LGBTQIA community, right? But we have a community here. There are a lot of us here, and we deserve that representation in the state house. Statewide, we have 1 person who's part of the community. Statewide, in our elected officials, that is an LGBTQIA member, and none in our state house. So it's really important for us to have that representation. Going back to what you said, I've already kind of stated that diverse perspective who can help with the well-rounded policy.
Yeah. So what issues are you prioritizing in the next legislative session, and how do they relate to wider Idahoan concerns?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on this question too a little bit, is, the policies that I care about are the ones that impact the day-to-day life of Idahoans. This is the work that Idahoans want our legislators to be doing. The 9th Idaho Policy Report or Survey, this is from, I'm getting this wrong, it's the 9th Annual Idaho Policy Survey was just released. And in the first time of its 9 years, there's over 40% of Idahoans feel like Idaho's going in the wrong direction. And that's directly tied because we're not talking about the issues that are impacting the day-to-day lives of Idahoans: education, job growth, healthcare, climate change. These are the issues that will impact our day-to-day lives. So that's what I want to focus on. But again, bringing it from that diverse perspective, my unique lived experience, and the perspective of the LGBTQIA community. Uh-oh, I think I've lost audio. Let's see here.
That was me. I lost the audio. My apologies.
All good. I was like, wait a second.
Can you explain why every vote matters, especially in local and state elections?
Yeah, my focus on voting really is, I think voting matters across the board. My focus has really shifted to local and state voting, because these are where so many of the policies that are being introduced are directly impacting our lives in the state. And I know people are really tired of go vote. Please just go vote, because there is not always a feeling like their vote, even if it makes a difference, matters, because they're not seeing the results that they had hoped for when they're voting for particular people. But from a local and state level, especially, to use an example, I'm going to use general numbers here because I don't have the exact stats. But for example, in my district, we have District 16, which is West Boise Garden City area. We have over 27, I believe, thousand people registered to vote. And so the way the election that I'm working on right now, we will have a primary election, which is we have people who are running for the Democrat options on the Democratic side. We'll have people running for Republican side. So the primary vote is to determine who do you want to represent you from a particular party. So that's what a primary election is. And then you have the general election, which I think more people are familiar with, where you go and you vote for the person that you want to have this position.
Right.
So, right. And in a primary election, we see a very low number of people who actually go and vote. So in my district, I think 27,000-ish people are registered to vote. And in the last primary election, the person who won with like 3,500, we'll say 3,500 votes. Again, generalizing on the numbers, but they're pretty close to correct. So that means that 3,500 people, there were more than that because they voted for other folks, but around 3,500 people of that 27,000 made the decision on who their representative was going to be. Because in Idaho, generally, who wins the primary ends up winning the general election. So this is why votes matter. We're seeing this happen in our city elections as well. We're seeing this happen in our state elections, that there are people who are winning by sometimes 17 votes, 140 votes, or it's being decided by a very small percentage of the people who live in that district. And that's where you have the ability to make change.
When I went to the city council meeting, when they did the swearing in, Kathy Corliss, who's in my district,
Yes,
actually won by 16 or 17 votes, which is mind-boggling.
Right. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. And that was actually who I was referencing. Another friend of mine was running for school board, and she would have been an incredible school board member, and she lost by just over 100 votes. So these are, there is an ability to really make an impact at our state and local levels, and it's so important we have the people we want representing us in those positions. We're seeing the outcome by now.
Yeah, most definitely. So what's your experience as an LGBTQIA individual in Boise, and how does it influence you personally and professionally?
I personally, and I'm going to speak from a very personal perspective and this is not the perspective of every member of the community, is I live pretty openly and I'm willing to have a lot of conversations and do a lot of educating and sharing my experience. I hold a lot of privilege. I am a white, transmasculine, I think pretty much passing at this point, trans person, and I could go on. So I hold a lot of privilege and I have an ability to really be vocal when I want to be vocal and share my experience. So I really try to do that. And so for me, that kind of correlates to why I'm running for office, and it correlates to the community work that I do and being around community members. And so from a professional or a personal level, a lot of my time is spent having conversations with folks and helping them understand, like, we are just people. Like I use this example, and it's so silly, but I use this example a lot with, like, I have a calendar reminder to help me remember to turn my mattress. This is the big scary thing that people are afraid of. And that's kind of being a little bit silly, overly silly, because I am one representation of what LGBTQI living is, and people come in all different forms and beliefs and ways that they approach the world. But I just like to tell people, like, you're really afraid of nothing. There's nothing to be concerned about here. And then professionally, I'm lucky to be able to bring my identity into my professional life as well, and work with my colleagues to see how we can professionally do work that benefits and uplifts the LGBTQIA community, and we find opportunities to do that in our work. And so my identity influences every single day of my life, and I love it. I'm grateful to be able to do this work.
That's awesome. So you mean you're just a person?
Just a person.
Just
walking through this world. Like, I'm really excited on Friday to maybe like make some dinner, order some pizza, watch a movie. I don't know. Wild stuff.
I love that. I love that. So if you had to pick a single aspect of our community that you love, what would it be?
I think that I just have to say, like, our community shows up for each other. That is one of my absolute favorite things. I was just having a conversation that, also the nice thing is when we're with community, there is oftentimes this ability to be able to speak in short form. We don't have to explain our identities. We don't have to explain why we feel a certain way, and we can just be together and have that comfort level. But outside of that, I just see so many people in our community stepping up for each other and making sure that we are uplifting each other, taking care of each other. We're sharing our funds with each other to make sure people are taken care of. And that is, you know, community is truly a word that I would tie to the LGBTQIA folks in Idaho, for sure. Community.
I love that. So, what's your vision of hope for LGBTQIA rights and inclusivity?
This is a big question. Obviously, my hope is that we would have, one thing that does not exist in Idaho is the gender identity and sexual orientation are not a part of the Idaho Human Rights Act. So we don't have protections throughout the state of Idaho. There are cities, I think 12 of them, and maybe around 12 of them have actually passed protections, Boise being one of those, that protects gender identity and sexual orientation for folks. But as a state, we have been trying for well over a decade. We've had our one and only hearing 10 years ago, or 10 sessions ago. We had our one and only hearing to add the words gender identity and sexual orientation to the Idaho Human Rights Act. It didn't pass. This work continues to be something that we try to do. But now today, we can't even get a hearing. We can't even get our legislators to hold a hearing to add these protections for 48,000 of us, 48,000 constituents. So my hope is that we can, obviously my hope is that we can change that. And how we change that is going to come in a lot of different forms. Part of it is who we're electing and bringing into office that helps make these decisions. And I think part of that goes into, we have a lot of community advocacy, activist members who are doing the work outside of this to try to push our rights forward. And so my hope is that we could just have rights that so many Idahoans already enjoy. How we do that is going to be likely a long road ahead of us, but it's going to take all of us, and especially our allies, to really step up and actually show up and tell their legislators, this is not what we want, really vocally, specifically about LGBTQIA issues.
So if 48,000 of us and our allies actually got up and voted,
yes,
we would get
make a big difference. Yes,
we would get there.
We would need people to run in our more rural areas. But that's where we would need a lot of our allies also to show up and run in those rural areas. There's just a safety and component for our community members outside of Boise, outside of our more urban areas, that we're going to really need allies to show up there, because there is a safety aspect to that we need their support.
Yeah. So tell me about your upcoming fundraiser event.
Yes. So in collaboration with Coco Frio, who is an incredible drag queen here in Boise in the Treasure Valley, who is constantly hosting events, she and I, Nikson for Idaho, have collaborated on an event called Drag the Bands Down. We have 6 incredible performers who are going to be at Somewhere Bar on February 9th. At 10 p.m., which is a little late for me, but I will be there.
It's at 10 p.m.?
Doors open at 9, starts at 10 p.m. I promise it's going to be worth it. But yes, we're going to be holding a performance where we're going to be able to see these incredible queens and kings perform and have that self-expression and the ability to bring community together and enjoy queer joy, queer space, and be together celebrating something that is really important in our community, an ability to self-express, an ability to have this entertainment. This is a form of art for our community. So we wanted to bring all of this together for this event, Drag the Bands Down. We're going to have a raffle as well there, where we're going to have items from incredible, very inclusive, very supportive local businesses that we're going to be raffling off. And we are going to, donations will go to support my campaign, which I really incredibly appreciate. This is how I get into office. It's incredible how much money it requires to be able to run for office. And so every dollar that we make at the door will go to help supporting our campaign, my campaign, running for this for office. We also want to make sure that our entertainers make some money. So all the tips, everything that way goes to our entertainers and our performers to make sure that they get paid as well. And that's super important to us. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. I'm very, little aside, it's also my 40th birthday that night too. Did I plan a drag show event on my 40th birthday, and am I that kind of person? Yes, I am, 100%.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to your 40th birthday, even if it is at 10 p.m. at night.
Yes. Yes, please. Hopefully people can come and enjoy it. And again, one of the things I care about when I decided to run for office was you got to bring some happiness and some joy into it. And because why not? Maybe our legislators would be, a little happier if they did something like this, but we're very excited to see community there.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to sign off with?
I think a lot of what I said today, there's an opportunity to make change. So look into your local and state elections and see how you can get involved. There's so many resources available that can show you how you can do that, because I recognize not a lot of people have resources or understanding how to engage in this way. You can reach out to my campaign. My URL is at the bottom. We would happily provide any support and insight. And if you can, please sign up to volunteer. Please donate to the campaign, and more than anything, would love to see you at this event on February 9th.
I would love that. So thank you for tuning in to Pride Pages podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.